This video is about the Tealight dimensions and scenes, and we're going to, by the end of this model, we're going to produce 4 images. Looks like this one here of the entire Tealight, this one of the rib, this one of the spine, and this one of the candle block. And we're going to be able to take those images, print them on paper, and take them out into the workshop with us, rather than having to take our computer out and potentially put the computer in harm's way while we're working in the workshop. Now, in the document that I provided you previously for the modeling, I produced this drawing here, and we are not going to produce that as part of this video. It is a little more advanced than what I want to go for. We're just going to go for the basics of the individual components and the overall assembly. We are, of course, going to start with the Tealight model that we've done previously, and in that one we had the Tealight itself. What we had done is we had created 3 components: the candle block, the rib, and the spine. And we had assigned those to layers, so that on the assembly layer we had 2 ribs and 2 of the candle blocks. We had the candle block itself on a separate layer, the rib on another layer, and the spine on another layer. Now, this is partly for convenience of drawing and modeling, but it is also partly for convenience of doing your dimensioning. So we're going to start with probably the easy one that we have here, the small one. And I'm going to hide everything except one rib. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to firstly orient this the way I want it, which I had drawn it this way. It doesn't really matter which way I had done it, I just did it this way because it's the same way as I'm going to be doing the spine. Get it to roughly where I want to have it here, and then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to come over to my tools here next to my tape measure tool. I'm going to get the dimensioning tool, click on that, and I'm going to start dimensioning my rib. You'll see there I have a purple dot that's clicking to the end, and so I'm going to pull a dimension up like this. I'm going to come here again, click to there, pull that one up there, from there to there. This time when I pull up, it will snap and match. Now you can see you can go out to the side on the horizontal plane, or you can bring it up like this, and I'm planning to do it like that. And I'm going to do this. Now, you might notice that in this case I drew this from front to back. This 12mm isn't very clear, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the text position. I need to make sure my dimension remains highlighted. I come here to dimension or to text position, and I'm going to click outside start. And I can do outside start because in this case I started here and ended there. If I'd done it the other way around, I would have had to click outside end. So we're going to keep on with the dimensions as we go along, and we're going to do this. I have a dimension here, and I'm going to go down with that. Again, that matches up. You can see that little dotted line between the two. Let me press escape because I don't want it to do that. I want the purple dot. I don't want to highlight a dimension. And I'm going to come down here. In this case, text position, I'm going to go outside end because I drew it that way. And the only other dimension I want to put onto the rib is this here. From this point to this point, I want to match up to there, and then I'm going to dimension from here to there, and I'm going to match up there. Now, this little bit of texture, endpoint and rib, is a bug from SketchUp. I don't quite know how to get rid of it other than to shut the model down and start it up again. So I'm just playing a little bit with my dimensions here. What I am trying to do as I set this up, I prefer to make sure that everything I'm trying to display is going to be within this little window here. I don't like it to protrude over the panels that pop up here, and I don't like my model to go above this line here into this area here with the toolbar here. And the reason for that is going to become a little bit clearer later when I do an export of the image. So what I have now is I have the dimensions, I have it all set up. What I'm going to be doing is I need to control when these things are visible. We know that we've got the rib that we can switch on and off. We can switch off the candle block and the spine and all the rest of it. What we need to do is we need to be able to make the dimensions invisible as well. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to create a layer here, and I use the convention Z_, and then I use the name of the component. Now, there's no good reason for the Z underscore other than it's a system that I use. I find that what it does is if it's listed alphabetically, it'll put all the dimensions and information layers at the bottom of the list, and that suits me fine. It doesn't matter, as I say, work out a convention that works for you and be consistent. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of those dimensions, I'm going to go to entity information, and I'm going to assign them to ZRib. And when I come back here to the layers and I turn the rib back on, I have a rib that I can have a look at. Now, to produce a drawing that I want to export, I can take a snapshot of this now, and there are a couple of ways I can do it. I can come over here and I can export download a PNG file, and it would do this. I could come here and I could hit export. I find that that does work, but I sometimes find I prefer not to do that. I find it a little quicker with a different method. If I do this, I have to save it as a file, and I have to manage the file, and I might have to clear the file out later. Whereas I sometimes find that I can just use a snipping tool. I can take a screenshot from it, I can copy it, and I can paste it, and I don't actually create a file on my hard drive, so I don't have that management issue there. Before I go ahead and do that though, I am going to do a couple of things. One is that I may not wish to include my axes in my view, so I'm going to come over here to the spectacles and I'm going to switch off the axes. So now I have a nice clean view, and I can obviously take my snipping tool. I'm working with a PC, so I have a snipping app, snipping utility that looks like this. I come here and I go new, and I can come and I can drag, and then once I've got this there, it appears in my snipping tool. I can save it if I wish to, or I can just copy it and paste it in there, and that's great. I've now got what I need for one of my images. But the thing is, if something changes in the model, I don't know what I've got to do to come back. Every time I fiddle with it, I've got to come back and set it up and take another snip if I want to make a small change. So if I want to come back to this view, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to come here to this little movie clapboard. It's called Scenes, and I'm going to, while I have this set up like this, I am going to hit plus, and it's going to warn me that it's going to save it as a new style. I just say OK and let it do what it's going to do, and then this is going to happen here. Now the advantage of that is that when I come to create my actual candle block and I look at it like this, if I want to go and see the dimensions of the rib at any time, I just come down to the scenes and I do that, and look at that, it's there. So the scenes allow you to come back to a particular angle of camera, distance of camera, and selection of layers that are visible. In this case, the layers that are visible are the red and the rib and the Z rib layer. So I can do the same thing as I go through. I can turn on my spine, I can turn it around, and I can do this here. I'm going to zoom to where I want it to be to make a diagram that is approximately what I want, something like that. And then I go and I add my dimensions as I've done previously. Now there's lots of dimensions here. You don't need to watch me do all of them. I'm just going to do a few of them, just so that you can see some of these tricks happen again. Now there I didn't keep my dimension selected, and so when I went to do that it didn't work. So there we have that. I have a few dimensions. What I want to show you is that as I'm doing these dimensions here, I'm going to, I can edit my dimension if I want to. I'm going to add these dimensions. I'm going to follow the same process as I did previously, where what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them onto a layer, and I'm just going to dimension these ones across here. There we go. So I'm going to take all of these dimensions across here. So I'm just going to make my spine invisible. I'm going to select all my dimensions. Let's do it that way, then they're all selected. I'm going to create a tag, which I'm going to call Z_spine, and I'm going to say OK. I'm going to turn my spine back on, and then just for good measure I'm going to come down and I'm going to add a scene there. Now what I didn't show you earlier, these are scene 1 and scene 2. I can rename this. I just click here and I make that rib, and I can make that the spine, and I can rearrange the order of them if I wish to for convenience. So now I've got my spine. If I want to come back and look at my rib, I see my rib, and the problem we have is that these dimensions have appeared. So although I'm only supposed to have 2 layers visible, now I've added my Z spine, and that has added it to every existing scene that I have. I only had one, but it's added it to that. And what that means is that I need to come here and open up my rib scene. I need to come here and switch off that layer with the Z spine. I actually hadn't assigned those layers to it. So what we've got to do is, let me come back here. These are still all selected, so I'm going to take my ribs away. I'm going to take my, there we go. So those I should have already allocated. They're untagged at the moment. They need to go to Z spine. So if I come down to rib, they are visible, but what I've got to do is take away Z spine, and then I have to come to my scene here, and I have to hit these 2 arrows here to update the scene. It's going to ask me what I should update. It's got a variety of options. You can be selective if you wish. I always just click OK. So now if I come to my spine, it will look at my spine, and this is correct because the rib layers were already created when I created this one, and if I come back to rib, this one is already created here. So the trick is that when you're going to be creating scenes, think a little bit ahead and create all of the layers that you're going to need, all of the tags you're going to need. So I know I'm going to need one called Z candle block, and I also know I'm going to need one called Z assembly. Alright, now at this stage, if I come back to here to scene or to spline, you will see that these are active. I don't have anything on here, so I need to switch those off and hit update. And I need to go to the rib, and I'm going to need to do the same thing again. So even before I have drawn anything and I have messed up the picture that I have, I can actually come and sort this out here and get my planning correct. So that's my rib, that's my Z rib. My next one is going to be my candle block, and I wish to have my candle block on there. Now how do I want it to be oriented? I might want to actually just get it somewhere like this. This is probably how I had it the first time round. I know I had my candle block more or less in this orientation. Take away the spine and the rib. In order to dimension this, there are a couple of tricks that are needed. When I come and I do my dimension here from corner to corner, that's really easy. But what I need to dimension on this is I need to dimension this distance down here, and I need to dimension the diameter of the circle. And because this has been made into a component, it's a little more tricky. I can open up and do this, but then it becomes part of the component. So the trick I'm going to use is I'm going to use firstly a guideline, which I'm going to draw corner to corner, and then I'm going to use an actual line that I use from that endpoint to that endpoint, because it will allow me to dimension that line quite comfortably. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to draw a line down the depth of the candle block, and I'm going to make sure I orientate this the way I want it to be to make sure it works. And I'm going to just also shift this down a little bit so that it's definitely lower than that level. At this stage I don't need the guideline anymore. I'm going to go to the dimensions. I'm going to pick, dimensions, not guideline. I'm going to pick the end point of the line to the end point of the line, and I'm going to bring this up like this. Now I'm going to orientate it just a little bit more that way so that it sits in there, and I'm also going to take a dimension like this, and I'm going to bring it forward to there so that we can see what it looks like, and that's pretty good. Ignoring this little glitch in the middle there, that actually looks pretty good in terms of an orientation. So I can create a scene which I know has my candle block and my Z candle block. I need to, of course, well, there are a couple of things I need to do. I need to delete that line because it's not part of the model, and I need to delete that line because it's not part of the model. But I then need to take each of my dimensions, I need to select them, I need to put them onto the layer Z candle block, which is this one down here. I need to make sure these are the only two layers that are visible, and then I come here and I create a scene which I'm going to call candle block. Okay, and that should work just fine, except, well, we've already fixed it. So now if we have a look at the rib, we've got a scene that does that for us, we've got one that's a spine that does that for us, and we have candle block that does this for us. As you can see, midpoint and candle block is not going away, it is a bug, as I say in SketchUp. So the last scene that we want to be doing is the overall model, and so what we're going to do is we're going to take away our dimensions here, we're going to turn on the assembly, the rib and the spine, we're going to get it the way we want it, and in this case I'm actually not going to dimension anything, but what can be quite useful is this little label tool here. And when I first click on the label tool, it's going to automatically give me the name of the component, spine. I can change whatever text I want, and if I'm not clicking on the component, it'll give me different information, so we need to type whatever we're going to need. But for now, I actually want the component names because they are sensible part names, and I want to actually show them on the drawing. So that what you can do is you can match the drawing to the parts list, and you can see what the different parts are, what they look like, and where they are in the actual model. You can also from this see how many there are of each. Now last time what I did to select all of these is I went and I took this away, but it doesn't always work. You saw that when I took the spine away, it also took away this label. So sometimes that doesn't work, sometimes you can't just select as you go along, and so sometimes what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to select them individually. If you can group them and select them that way, that's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these onto the Z assembly, which is this one here. Now Z assembly at this stage is not visible, so I want to put assembly, rib and spine in order to show all of those, but I'm going to add Z assembly to this, and I'm going to go create myself a scene down here which I'm going to call assembly. And because assembly comes first, I'm going to move it to the top just because that's the order I like it to be. So that's how we've done the dimensions. There are still some dimensions missing from here. I have a variety of dimensions for the insides of this to still be add, and I have some dimensions to this to still add. You don't need to sit and watch me do them. Just be mindful that they will need to be there, and you need to decide what dimensions have to go as you go along. The trick I'm going to show you as I do now is just to get it out into the paper version. Let me just move this down a little bit, so that's that. Fortunately this little glitch has disappeared, so let's make the most of that. I'm going to start with the assembly drawing here, which I said I wanted that above there. Well, let's move that down there that way. So I'm going to come and select this, and as I say, I can export, or I can use my snipping tool and I can copy this and paste it. Once you've got that little image copied, you can put it into a Word document, a PowerPoint document, anything you like. You're just going to print it out. If you're documenting your work properly in a folio, then the folio document will probably have some drawing borders, and you're going to paste it into that border. It's just an image. Remember one of the things that you want to do, and this is the other reason why I actually prefer to use the snipping tool. If I use the snipping tool, what I get is I get a better, more closely cropped image right from the beginning. Now that's not so great because I got this little bit here, so I'm going to say new. Actually, I'm not going to say new, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to come here, I'm going to shift this down a little bit to make sure it's clear, and I'm going to take my snipping tool once more and do new from here. In this case I'm going to start down at the bottom because I've got a good reference point to work from, and I have a very closely cropped image to start with. Whereas if I was to use the export, then I would get a different looking image. And let me show you that. So if I were to export or to download, it's a PNG, I keep getting mixed up, it will download this entire file, which is going to often be longer than it needs to be high, and it'll have this logo. So I not only need to save it to my hard drive, but when I bring it into whatever document I'm working on, I'm going to need to crop and stretch it to fill my page and not have unnecessary information in it. So those are the reasons why I prefer not to use the download, or how it says export. That's why the terminology is confusing. They've changed where it is in SketchUp, and I prefer to just do a snip with a cut and a paste. You can also do a screen dump, in which case you've still got to do the crop and the resize anyway. But that's the basic method for getting scenes and dimensions into a model. The one thing I haven't discussed about the scenes, and let me come back to here, I talked about the fact that it's a good idea to plan your tags up front. So what are the rules for what tags do you need? Well, in the previous workflow I've said that as you draw each component, you assign a layer to it. As you create duplicates of components, you will create an assembly or maybe a series of sub-assembly layers for this. And these are done for modeling purposes to make your life a little bit easier, but they also often translate directly into scenes. Sometimes you will need an additional scene. If you remember this other one that I showed you previously, which is this, no, hang on, let's come to that one there. This one is a totally separate scene. I would need to create a tag specifically for it, and then I would place everything that you see on this on the same layer, including the actual components themselves, all of the labels, and all of the dimensions. They would all appear on one scene. So you are going to need to have at least one tag per scene that you do. And in this case, these information or assembly or dimension layers are the ones that actually match to the scenes. These ones here are more for drawing convenience than they are for the scenes, although obviously they tie together. And so with a scene, as you'll see, you generally have at least 2 tags visible, frequently more if you're combining objects together and doing some sort of assembly or sub-assembly. But think about it logically, just plan it out. As I say, the idea is create your tags beforehand if you can, and then go through and create all your scenes afterwards. It makes life a little bit easier. It saves you having to update scenes as you go along, and it keeps the whole process a whole lot neater. It also means that you can actually orientate your object that you're drawing, put on the information around it, get the picture looking right, and just immediately go into the scene at that point. You don't have to worry about, I would create the scene now, except I haven't created all these layers. What do I do? What's my work order? Rather create your tags as soon as you can, and then go create your scenes much later in the task. And I hope that helps. It is the step that is necessary to get the drawings out of the model into your document, your design document, onto a piece of paper that you can take into the workshop, and there are both important steps and an important thing to be able to do. So I hope that helps you, and thank you very much for watching.